Disclaimer. The information on this show and provided from or through this show is general in nature and is not specific to you or anyone else. You should not make any decision, financial investment, life, or otherwise, based on any of the information presented on this show without undertaking independent due diligence and consultation with a professional or advisor. You understand that you are using any and all information available on or through this show at your own risk. Try not to be a f***ing idiot.
No, I mean everyone is with with social distancing. It's been like that. Like I've come back to Brisbane and there's only a handful of people that I've really caught up with because it's sort of just been keeping that bubble. And it's just sort of that sort of cultural thing now. It's like everyone's sort of sticking to their bubbles a little bit until there's a bit more certainty around when we can really reconnect with sort of a wider community.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you enjoy it? Like, are you naturally introverted or do you find it hard?
No, I don't. I am not naturally introverted, but it has been appropriately timed for me. I've been through a bit of a rough patch.
Oh no!
Shit. And it's sort of my extroversion has sort of been beaten down into introversion, and so I'm sort of just like slowly starting to flourish again back into being extroverted.
Right. My God.
Yeah.
That sounds tough. I don't know if you want to talk about it. Probably need to do it over drinks, and doing it in person would be a good
idea. Yeah, I think that's something to talk about over drinks, definitely.
Okay, that sounds good. I got like 60 seconds, and then I'm going to run out of here. This is recording, but like I am going for a really organic process when it comes to podcasting. So I'm heavily a bit, let's say, a dab of Joe Rogan in the concept for it, but it's very much not structured formally. It's just organic. We'll see where it goes.
Cool. That sounds good.
Keeping it light, keeping it loose.
Are you gonna be editing it at all, or is it just gonna sort of just be a big recording of what we're saying?
It'll be a big recording. I'll have I'll say officially when it started, and I'll ask you to introduce yourself, and then we can just kick off I'm just riffing like that rather than having. This is the blah, blah, blah podcast. Welcome to, I'm finding that. Okay, I'm going to run now. I'll be back. Hold on. Give me a sec.
All right. Welcome back, man.
Back. What was I saying? So I don't want it to be something that is super formally structured. I find like people tend to go into this auto response mode, very robotic, and there's no flavor to what their responses are. And that's what I'm looking for, is something that's a little bit more organic, but a little bit more real as well. And wanting people to share some honest truths about themselves and their story, because I find that we learn, or I know I learn very much from other people's stories.
Cool.
Sweet.
I feel like there's so many exciting places this can go.
Yeah. Well, let's get started then. How did we meet? I'm trying to remember the first time we ever met. And I feel like Meow Meow Ludo Disco Meow had some involvement in this.
Yeah, I think it was possibly Meow connecting. I think we were introduced 3 different ways at least before we ever met in person. And we never really connected until we sort of like met in person at the VR meetup that you were running here in Brisbane.
Yes.
So because I know you actually reached out to me once and you were looking for a developer. And I had a previous tech company in Wollongong, and that didn't really go anywhere. And I only realized that after I was searching for your email, and that email came up, and I didn't put the two together.
Wow.
And I don't know how that was introduced. But then it would have been a second time through the VR meetups in Sydney. And the people that were organizing those, we got connected through that. And that, again, was me just looking through my emails, I think, and finding an introduction, or maybe just sort of hearing your name and sort of connecting the dots, but only connecting the dots once we'd met in person at your VR meetup would have been like at the Powerhouse.
Yes, I
Um,
remember that.
Probably like my first time like being here in Brisbane with the Hot Desk program.
Oh, of course. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that was a few, that's almost like 2 years ago now, would you say? 2, maybe 3 years ago. It's crazy how fast
Yeah,
time flies. But
I think that was the 2018 to 2019. No, 2017 to 2018. That was when I was the 6 months I was here for the Hot Desk program.
yeah, crazy. And I mean, your story is a crazy one, and I want to go down that path more because I think the way you came across on my radar, somehow I found out that you'd worked for the over with Meta over in America as one of the engineers on that project. And at the time, Meta was the only, as far as I'm aware, other than Google Glass, the only company that was pursuing the concept of an augmented reality pair of glasses, right? And there were, I mean, there's always the hype that's involved, but uh, for someone in Australia to be an engineer that actually went over there and worked on or was involved in a project like that in America, it's just like mind blowing that there was someone like that even in Australia. So, can you, if you don't mind, backtracking a little bit and going on a bit of a stream of consciousness around how you got involved with Meta?
Yeah, that's a wild story, that is, and there's so many different ways to tell it. And I feel like probably the best thing to do would be to go back to just like, yeah, like how I even got involved in that. And so I was at the time I was actually studying at UAW, and I was doing computer science, and I sort of had my own startup in teaching kids online how to make games. And I was also involved in Hackathon, which was at the time Australia's biggest hackathon. It's like Hackathon, Hack Wollongong sort of
That's
combination
cool.
there.
That's really cool.
And so I was the lead organizer behind that. And this was 2013, and I was looking. I knew. So the company Meta was co-founded by Ben Sand and Maron Grivitz. And so Maron is an Israeli American who was from New York, and Ben Sand was an Australian who he met when Maron did like a year of studying in Sydney. And I knew Ben because he tried to poach me previously for one of his previous startups into the game development space.
Right.
And I'd met him at some meetups, and he told me these crazy, wild stories about Silicon Valley. And I was sort of like just fresh out of high school and just like had never even heard of Silicon Valley, and it just sort of blew my mind and the stories he was telling me.
Yeah.
And I saw he'd come back to Australia for a bit, and he was like getting he was getting a visa, and he just posted on Facebook. I was cooking dinner at home one night. It was like 8 p.m. And I saw on Facebook that he needed someone to sort of like just sit in the car with him and help him with his Kickstarter, doing emails while he drives to Canberra and back to pick up his visa before his flight leaves the next day. And so I volunteered for that. And like he comes and picks up my door at like 10 p.m. We're sort of driving down to Canberra, and he's just, I'm in my mind, I'm like, this is awesome. He has this really cool tech startup. They just got accepted into Y Combinator. This is like a program I'm like fascinated by. And he's got this really cool tech. Maybe he could sponsor my event. So I was sort of like trying to like sell him on the idea of being involved in my event. And then on the way, it sort of flipped around, and he was like, well, how about you come and organize these sort of events for me in Silicon Valley?
Wow.
And so sort of like, that's an exciting idea. And sort of dropped him off at the airport and sort of like headed home, and I'm like, no, that's an idea I should follow up on. Like send him an email, and gets back to me when he lands in Silicon Valley. And he's like, all right, if you can be here in a week, we'll give you an internship for 3 weeks. And I'm like, that sounds awesome. I'll do that. A week later, I was in Silicon Valley.
How old were you then?
I would have been 19 or 20.
That's crazy. So,
Yeah.
So I mean, it's funny how, depending on who you know, it can open up some pretty wild opportunities and the doors that unfold from that. With getting into the space, even to begin with, like what got you into VR? You were talking about game development, so you were teaching kids game development, which I think is awesome, something that schools should do more of. With that, though, again, you were in high school. So where did you find that transition period where you thought, like, what's the real origin story of Brennan Hatton?
Yeah, so I started making games when I was like, started programming my own games when I was about 14.
Okay.
And so I was sort of like, a lot of sort of like animation stuff before that. I was really into like video filming and sort of like doing like animations. I did a lot of PowerPoint things and sort of like tried to make my own games where I'd like, it'd be like
I remember
hyperlinks
doing
from
that
one
in school
PowerPoint to
too.
another.
Yeah, I remember doing that in
Yeah.
high school. That was atrocious, but yeah, I remember that.
It's a surprisingly common story for game developers our age, just trying to get into that space. And
Right.
I think it's
Okay.
really cool.
I thought
It's
it was yeah. I've never told anyone else about that, so that's funny that you did that too in high school. Maybe it's an Australian thing. I don't know.
I've met a few people who have been like, that's how I started making computer games, is I was just building like PowerPoint presentations and having hyperlinks between them.
Yeah.
It's interesting. But yeah, it was very much in that sort of game development space and just sort of wanting to like create my own universes, create my own worlds, sort of tell my own stories through them, like sort of create entertainment and just sort of engagement in that.
Did
And
you
I
read
built
a lot of
computer
fantasy as a
games.
kid? Did you read and play a lot of computer games or read a lot?
I read a little bit of fantasy. I played a lot of computer games. I remember sort of like at first like sort of switch of like me going from playing computer games to wanting to make the computer game. It was sort of like there was a lot of like, you know, like Tony Hawk where you had like you could like build your own levels and they had like level editors and stuff like that. And then there was sort of like these other games and I'm like, why can't I edit the levels of these other games? Why can't I edit everything in this game? And it's like, why don't I just make the game myself?
That's crazy. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so you go from teaching, so then you start teaching kids. Was this you teaching other high school kids, like younger kids, how to make games? Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, I set up. I started off as a business, like just in a business based on Skype, where I just had kids sort of in New Zealand and all across Australia that their parents would basically start paying me to tutor them, and I was sort of like evolving that into like classrooms and how I could just basically like an in-person e-learning for building games. But just like
this would have been way
stuff
before
where
Udemy and some of those other platforms, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And this was and it was just sort of like the focus on sort of approach I had was like, how do you take the math that you're learning in school or the math that you're about to learn in school and use that as a way that you can apply it in something you're interested to. So you've actually got motivation to learn it rather than just like, I'm learning this because the teacher says I have to.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting because I found most of the kids that I'd end up teaching, we'd end up doing year 11 and year 12 math, no matter what year they were in. And they just get it because they had the structure, the sort of the structure around it, but also just the motivation. They just like, I want to make my game this little bit better, and to do that, I need to learn this thing. Okay, I'll learn this thing, and it's like it's less about like sort of I'm learning this because I have to, or more about learning this because it's there's a goal in mind.
Yeah, that's fascinating, Brennan. That's really, really cool. Again, I still think we need more of that within the education system. We've got universities that are pumping out kids that have got, you know, a game design degree or a game development degree, but I've found it very unfortunate. I haven't found them to be up to scratch really to come into industry. And some of the stuff that they learn during a uni degree, I'm kind of thinking, well, you could have done this in high school if schools were more on top of that. It's still, and you probably experienced this as well, like when we were younger, there seems to be an uphill battle since then from the I don't know what it is, but media pushing that gaming and entertainment within the games industry is a negative, and you need to spend, you know, more time, I don't know, outdoors and interacting with people than you do with computer games. But that's eventually that's starting to change completely and flip on its head.
I think one of the really big ones that I like to talk to parents about, like sort of within my circles, is Minecraft and just the potential of Minecraft is like, it's not just like a gaming where you sort of like, you know, you spend an hour on it and it's just like mindlessness. It's like, no, this is like the new Lego, right? It's like, this is how you sort of like actually can learn about like computers. You can learn about circuitry, but you can just like learn about so much more and be creative with it. And it's just like, there's so much potential in even just playing games, let alone getting to make games and build your own things and just sort of understand technology better. It's just like, I think gaming is such a really powerful tool. And I think as technology is evolving, it's sort of proving that like gamers do have this really significant edge over using technology and understanding technology and being able to just sort of adapt to new things so much quicker because it's just sort of like built into the technology that the games are using already.
Yeah, and you would have seen they just announced it recently. The Epic Games is taking Apple to court, which I'm thinking, whoa! And then they ran that video, the promo,
Yeah.
1984. It's like, yeah, fascinating.
Yeah.
It's going to be a big. You're grinning. I don't know what to think of it. I'm just thinking, wow, 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 this is amazing. But I feel like Fortnite is that. I wish I had made Fortnite. I'm sure many people wish that, but they did. But is it Tim Sweeney is the CEO, the founder of Epic
That
Games?
the name sounds familiar, probably.
Yeah, but he's through Epic Games built Fortnite. In my mind, I'm thinking this is what companies like Facebook and so many others have been trying. Second Life have been trying to get that mainstream virtual world that can run in parallel to the physical world.
Mm.
I'd be fascinated to hear what your thoughts are on that and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing.
I love what they've done with Travis Scott recently, earlier this year, where they just put on just a concert. They put on a concert in this game. I think it's really interesting. Just sort of like I don't play Fortnite. I've played sort of like the PUBG games and sort of stuff like that a little bit. So I understand the concept behind it, sort of like the core mechanics of the game, but it's not something I haven't played. But I think it's really interesting to sort of like from what I do understand and the streaming that I've seen of it is sort of like how this sort of style of game has evolved, and it's interesting like just the communications and so how big the like different sort of like communication things they have through it, like dance, where you can just like throw a different move, or you can do a sort of celebration that you've sort of like beat someone, and how that's really evolved and how much that seems to be shaping the platform, and the fact that they've turned it into a literal concert platform where they've had millions of people in a live concert, and this is an animated conference or concert that you can like you can just be there and you can experience it in ways that just like is not being possible in reality, and you can still experience it while you're at home anywhere in the world. Like they broke the world record for like the most people at a concert ever. Like it's insane. I think it's really exciting. And I hope they keep moving it down this sort of like positive path of more sort of like expressive and creative sort of like dance. I think it's much more positive than the origins of it, where it's just sort of like shooting PvP, which is like is fine and fun, but not the direction that you should really be building such a great foundation for such a large platform.
Yeah, one I think really important component of what gaming is starting to do that I've noticed, and you will probably see this better than me, is that crossover between culture or multiple cultures. So you've got like Drake jumping in, and I remember that moment where Drake's live with Ninja in Fortnite, and Drake as a rap artist is like playing a computer game with Ninja, who's like an esports dude, and from the crossover that, and rap is doing this a lot as well, I think, as a musical platform, but gaming seems to be the current thing where it's cool to be a gamer now. And that component you mentioned, like the dancing, there's such an embedding of meme culture in it that the shooting is like the core game mechanics, but then all the meme culture is piled on top of that, which then pulls eyeballs, it pulls people's attention, and people share it. Like they want to talk about it. It's got the talking effect or online engagement effect.
Totally. I think that cross culture was really interesting, and sort of how games play a role in that. Because I think in terms of like cross culture and like cross media and like sort of like even just like diversity of different backgrounds and skills is really interesting with game development and just games in general, because they're a media that requires so many other medias, right? Like it's like games is it's like so similar to movie production. You've got the story writing, you've got to do lighting, you've got to do environment setup, you've got to do characters and the backstories, but then you have to do the 3D modeling for it. You've got to do programming for it. It's like, and then you've got the music for it as well, and sound effects, and you've got all these industries that are sort of mashing together into this one simulation gaming, like it's like neurology, right? It's like understanding the brain, understanding like sort of like, like how, but like there's learning behind it. You've got to be able to teach people in this. Like, it's like, I really see games as like this, like sort of like like combination of just like all the different medias. It's like you get all of them, you sort of put them into one. It's like games, like a good game, it kind of needs everything. And you need to, you want to consider as many of these as you can. Like the more of them you can consider and the more of them that you can build into what you're doing, the better the product is.
What
And that
happens?
doesn't surprise me.
Well, what happens,
Sorry?
Brennan, in 50 to 100 years with games? What's a game in 100 years? I wonder.
Yeah, I think that's a long way away. I think there's so much to think there, because I think that far away, and I think games are like critical in that, like it's gamifying life. It's giving purpose, right? It's sort of like what happened, like, and what is this future that we're in, right? It's like, do people even need to work? Like, is there human labor necessary to create the survival of mankind, or is it all done by machines and AI, right? And if that's the case, then it's like, well, what keeps people alive? It's like, what's going to be the biggest killer of people? Like, is it actually going to be like, are we going to have this sort of like life-sustaining technology that can just keep us going forever? Or it's like, is it going to be this sort of like potential future where the biggest cause of death is just suicide because people are just over life? Right? It's like gaming, I can see, is just this huge piece of this puzzle where it's like, it gives people purpose, entertainment, creates this enjoyment in life. And it can be like, even before this sort of like far out sort of vision of the future where, like we could live forever and we don't need to work, right? It's just like, even just giving people more enjoyment in the things they're already doing now and the things they have to do.
Yeah.
I think games is going to be a huge part of the future of everyone.
I agree, and I have this question in my mind as to whether we as a human species, we're making games, right? And then those games are made for us to play. Then we play those games, but then it's a circular loop because we then develop the technology for the next, like, we want to take the games to the next level. And then we make that next level of game. But then that next level of game, more and more people going into that game, they come out the other side and go, oh, let's build the next round of GPU technology so that we can have a higher visual, fidelity. And this cycle continues to loop around and around and around. I thought that movies would actually come to an end within the next 100 years. And I feel like movies and games would merge in the middle somehow.
That's really interesting. I could definitely see that sort of merge happening, but I wonder if that's going to be the end of movies as we know it, or just a new media. Because I feel like it's sort of similar to how like movies didn't kill radio, as to how like sort of the internet didn't kill the radio, right? It's like we've just got these additional layers of the technology. The technologies like still serve a purpose and still have their niche, where it's like you go in a car and you can like still turn on your radio, or you might turn on the next evolution of the radio, which isn't actually radio technology. It's now like audio streaming services, but I still might listen to like Triple J on my audio streaming service that isn't using any radio.
Yeah, interesting. Have you seen? I forget what it was called. It was Choose Your Own sort of adventure on Netflix. There was a show that came out. I could never figure out how to pronounce it properly, but that was fascinating because that was like Netflix is dipping their toes in this concept or this idea that you could have an interactive film. That was cool. I don't know have you seen anything or anyone else doing anything like that before? I think maybe Black Mirror was doing something similar.
There are some games that are like that. There's some really good story games where they're a little more involved, but it's more about the story, and you sort of have limited choice in terms of how you influence the story in the same way, where you have that like multiple choice, different outcomes. The story plays out different ways.
Like a visual novel.
Like a visual novel. And I think that's like, again, that's like one interpretation of it, right? It's like, because if I want to chill out and watch a movie, typically I don't want to have to be involved. I just want to like just relax my whole body, not have to be required to do anything, and then just be able to feel what I'm feeling, what the movie's like sort of making me feel, rather than be so involved and active in it. And so I feel like there's two different, like they're serving different purposes.
Yeah, that's fascinating. The other thing I find that we aren't doing much of is exploring the other senses. Like we seem to be very focused on touch and visual, but we aren't exploring temperature or smell. And that, to me, I'm guessing it's because we just haven't focused on hardware being able to do that. Like our mobile phones are tactile to a degree, but they don't induce heat on purpose. They don't induce smell on purpose. Yeah, so I don't know. Could be interesting.
Mm.
Seems like a
Yeah,
gap
I feel
there.
like that the technology is a bit of a limiting factor there. And it's like, and it's one of those things that I feel like from the perspective that I'm sitting in is really hard to judge as to whether it's a technology, like the technology is the real reason. Like, it's, I feel like the human eye, it's like we've got those three colors, right, that we can see that our screens are all made up of. They're like green, red, and blue. And it's like, if that's it's like that seems really simple, right? It's just like three things you turn on and off, you can do really simply. It's like, or does it just seem really simply because we've done it so well?
Yeah, absolutely. That exactly right. Like that life cycle. If we are building on top of it because it's got a commercial output and we're benefiting from that, then we're going to invest more money on top of it to do the same thing, just doing it
Mm,
better. That's
mm.
Oh, I also yeah. The history of technology is interesting as well. Like, what would have happened if Apple failed because the two Steves decided to split up early, right? Then we didn't have Apple. Would that mean that we'd have more mobile phone and computer companies out there? Do you think? Or
Or what would have happened if Charles Babbage had have got the funding to actually complete his sort of like computer model like 100 years earlier, and we would have
yeah,
had computers 100 years before? Like,
yeah.
how would have that changed timelines?
That would that I like to think about it. I know it's a bit strange, but the other thing that is really on my mind and something that I know you've got a lot of experience in is the gap between different demographics of people and their ability to access technology. So this is in alignment with your core focus and passion right now at Equal Reality.
Hmm.
Tell us some more about that and your journey in that space.
Just about equal reality.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so at Equal Reality, we create empathy training in virtual reality to put people in the perspective of vulnerable groups to experience things like discrimination. And we've been doing that for 4 years now, and it's a really exciting technology, and I feel like it keeps shockingly surprising me how relevant it's becoming increasingly. It's
Yep.
sort of like when we started this, it was sort of before the Me Too movement, and sort of like, like before there was this sort of really this big sort of like these. You just feel like there's this continuously these big
Social
waves of
outcry.
human rights,
Yeah.
social outcry. That's right, where it's sort of like it's important to understand other people's perspectives, and there are all
Mm.
these perspectives that are going overlooked in really powerful ways that it's like it's not appropriate, and ways that's just like it's really important to start understanding these different perspectives. And
Mm.
it's like we're seeing this again right now with the Black Lives Matter movement in the US. And it's just like how important it is to sort of just be able to like understand things from different perspectives. And it's been a really wild ride for us. It's been a crazy ride over these last few years. And we're yeah, we've got some really exciting stuff in the works at the moment, sort of that we've been building with some large brands around, very topical to what's sort of happening right now with the Black Lives Matter movement that we've been in development over the last year.
Yeah.
Um,
So you're
but
using virtual
it's
reality to build empathy effectively.
Yeah. So we're just like putting you in the perspective of somebody else in virtual reality. So you put on the glasses, and our experience is sort of broken up into like these three stages. So the first stage we call the sort of empathy experience, where we place you in front of a mirror. It's based off research out of the Stanford Human Interaction Lab, where you basically, when you sort of have this embodiment reflection in front of a mirror, and when your reflection moves the same as you do, it creates this thing it's called body transfer, where you start to see that body as your own body. And so
Wow.
we do this for about 2 minutes or a little less, where we just sort of like provide you context on the experience you're about to go into.
Mm.
And then we go into the sort of like bias awareness piece, where we place you in a social experience where you are now treated as somebody else, and you still have this different body, and you're just sort of becoming aware of what it feels like to be in this position, what it feels like to have people treat you differently based on this new character that you've become.
So
And so this
powerful.
is sort of about you sort of just recognizing this bias. And then we take you into a third experience where you get to go into that exact same experience that happened in number two, but as a bystander. So you're no longer this person that's the subject of this discrimination or bias, but now you have a chance to interrupt this, and you have a chance to sort of improve upon things as a bystander. and that we call the behavior practice. And then after that, we can sort of show you all this data and results about what you've been doing, like things like who you paid more attention to in the meeting, and sort of insights into your own bias and stuff like that as well. So it sort of like takes it from this like okay, like you're going to be someone and sort of understand their perspective, to now you've got a chance to practice things, to now you've got a chance to self-reflect and look at like, hey, here's some information about you that you might not have considered before.
Yeah. I'd be curious to know around how effective it is, and I've got a follow-up question around that. I'm assuming it's pretty effective.
Yeah, it's we've been getting some outstanding results. We did a study with Domain, which is an online real estate company here in Australia. We trained all of their employees across Australia.
Wow,
and
that's awesome.
We had 96% of people that went through that training. They felt like if they were to experience discrimination in the workplace, that they would feel comfortable knowing what to do in that experience, in that situation. So if they were to see this, like see something happen in the workplace now, they would feel like, I know what I can do to stop this from happening or improve things.
So you're normalizing something. You're making it's almost like something that maybe people weren't even aware of was happening around them, to then recognizing that something's happening, to then becoming okay to stand up against it, for it, whatever that might be. Social training, that is crazy for me to think about, because I'm wondering then, right? I know you've got a pure heart and you're going to use this to do good, right? What else can you use it for, though? Like that world of this technology being used in the wrong way, if it's really good at work at what it does, what's stopping people? Is there a standard? I don't think there is a standard around virtual reality experiences. I don't know if we have a rating system like we do with movies and games yet. Maybe you're more aware of that.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Right. Okay. So, and where does someone draw the line in terms of this is a good thing and this is a bad thing? We shouldn't be allowed to do this.
Well, actually, no. There is a rating system. So Oculus and different app stores, they have their own systems around what is appropriate to be on their store. But I think what's really interesting about these systems is they typically focus on, like, is it going to make someone sick? Is it doing anything illegal? So I feel like sort of like there's that like that there's this ethical gray area that might not be covered by them, of sort of like, is this the moral thing to do? Is it moral to put this up there, right? Where it's sort of like they make sure that when you release an app, it's not going to sort of make people feel ill because you're sort of like riding a roller coaster in a horrible way.
Yeah.
Or they make sure, it's not doing something outright illegal, where it's just sort of showing content that you shouldn't be shown. But then there's that sort of that gray area of like, like, are you manipulating people? And I feel like this is not just an issue with sort of like virtual reality. This isn't just an issue with like applications. It's just an issue with technology in general right now, right? Like this is like what we're seeing happening with Facebook and Twitter and social media, right? And it's like then the false news. It's like, where is the ethical lines between manipulation and like what you're doing as a tool to benefit people? And this is personally a problem I'm like, I really struggle with Facebook. Because I think Facebook's an incredible tool for connecting with people and for being able to, just build up your network and have the people that you want in your life stay up to date with what you're doing in your life and stay up to date with their life. But at the same time, I feel like the way the platform is being managed is incredibly unethical. And Mark Zuckerberg and what he's doing with Facebook, it's like, is something that's like, I question like how much I want to support that.
Yeah.
And so, but it's like, it's this interesting gray area that I think a lot of technology is facing right now, is this moral boundaries of like, particularly in the manipulation space. It's like, where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line, and who draws the line? How do you draw the line?
Who's responsible for what? Like, I think that's part of the whole Congress hearing that the megatech giants had to go through just recently, a couple of weeks ago, is that, well, if they allow for, maybe I come out and I post some outrageous fake news, right? Should I be held legally responsible for that? Or should Facebook be, or Google, for allowing it to even rank when someone is searching for a term that's slightly relevant to that outrageous fake news that I've posted? Who's liable at the end of the day? It's hard. I don't have the answers.
It's really hard. because I feel like there's so much to consider. So it's just like what is truth? You know, it's sort of
I
like what
think
is
that's
truth, what is
pretty
fact,
much what it comes
what
down
is
to.
opinion,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that's such a hard thing to define. And I feel like there's like it's
Because
I
there's
feel like it's
multiple
like
perspectives, which is the whole point of
yeah,
equal reality, is that put on this VR headset so you can see this from 5 different people's perspectives, because your perspective is only one and you won't have empathy to anyone else in the room unless you see it from their perspective. So
exactly.
almost need to read, like, a news article almost has to have 5 different perspectives attached to it, and it is not considered newsworthy until you have 5 different sources that are attached to it from 5 different perspectives, and that's just like almost like a diversity sort of quota. You need 5 different perspectives on it.
I feel like this gets into like ethical journalism, and ethical journalism and journalism practices are not a new thing, right? That's a thing that's been around for a long time, and things that are really well established. And I feel like can work really, really well, and just right now aren't being followed. And so sort of like you look at like where like the sort of like I think the sort of unethical side of journalism is largely coming from right now, and it's sort of things like Murdoch, right, and like the like Fox News, like particularly here in Australia, particularly in the US, where it's like, and they sort of classify their news as entertainment, therefore it doesn't have to be following these sort of like journalism guidelines, because it's no longer actually about the news, it's about the entertainment.
Yes. The
And so it's sort
entertainment
of like
value of it, yeah. So they're not claiming that it's has any innate statistical, like they're not claiming that it's accurate necessarily. It's more of an opinion and leading with opinion rather than leading with accuracy. I agree with you on that, and I don't really read like newspapers. I know that there's certain mega monoliths in the industry that tend to push a specific agenda with the stories that they publish in newspapers. But equally, I'm seeing on social media the amount of engagement. Like, people will have news pop up based on what they're engaged with, and you can quickly find this problem of people end up in a bubble. And like, at what point do you have to draw a line and go, oh, this person's in a bit of a bubble that is not complementary to the people that it's around them, and who needs to step in and educate that person, and should we educate that person? Equal reality should educate those people.
It's tricky. It's so tricky. It's like, yeah, like who steps in? How do you step in? It's like I feel like I feel like it's very similar to like I think of sort of like people getting stuck in like these sort of like deep bubbles in social media. I also put in the same group as a cult, right? Where like someone's like stuck in a cult or like one of those multi-level marketing schemes, right?
Yes.
Where it's sort of like they're trapped in not just a bubble, but they're trapped in manipulation. Like they're trapped in sort of like there's leadership somewhere within this, or some sort of thing that is like guiding them down a path.
Maybe it's really that, but I feel like the algorithms are perpetuating almost like our deepest, darkest fears and desires as well, right? Like,
totally.
Yes, there's certain players that are trying to orchestrate and put us into boxes and demographics, but I noticed that the algorithm will actually respond to what I'm interested in, and it will fill that need, and it will become more and more extreme because it's trying to get me to stay engaged with the platform. It's almost like it's innately made to take me down one extreme path, no matter what it is, any extreme path, because my senses need to be, my dopamine levels still need to be tickled enough that I actually go and log back on to Facebook and keep using it in a month's time, 2 months' time.
Well, what I think this is really interesting here is like why does it do that? And I feel like it's like connected to the business model behind this sort of social media, and that ad revenue. It's like the more eyes you have on it, the more money they make. And I think what's a big shift that needs to happen with technology is just how these business models are created, and the sort of like the way that business model is going to impact the future of the product. Because like if I was to think about like, and this is not an easy thing that I'm suggesting, right? But it's like if Facebook was a way that was incentivize people actually having meaningful relationships with their community and the people around them, instead of incentivizing more eyes on Facebook. Like, what would the product evolve into? How would it evolve? Like, how would that impact everyone in the world, where it's like they made money from a positive influence rather than them making money based on people just consuming their platform.
Yeah, that's
And
fascinating. Yeah.
And because I feel like there's like, it's like so much of social media is just that. It's just like they're optimizing it to get us to be eyes on the platform as much as possible. Where it's like if they could optimize it in a way where they profited from a good thing, like they profited from us connecting with our friends and creating meaningful connections, creating meaningful connections in our community, giving back to our community. Like if there was a way that they could make revenue from that, I think that'd be really exciting. I think that's like, that could solve so much of these issues of like sort of just wanting to just focus on the things that create conflict.
Yeah. No, that's really awesome. That's something, if we could move into a world like that, and I think games have had that stigma again around building a game that gives you that enough dopamine hit that you become addicted to it. And then the whole concept of gamified learning, gamification came out, and I thought that was really interesting because it's, making it easier for you to absorb information. And similar to your experience, right? You're finding kids who are younger kids in high school are willing to learn, year 11 and 12 grade maths because they're fascinated with the application being in the games, making games. So
totally,
context,
it's like it's gamifying math.
yeah, exactly.
By making games.
Exactly.
Yeah,
the full feedback loop. That's really, really fascinating. I wanted to end it there. I'm not planning on making these podcasts go for too long, and I'd love to end it on a positive note around how someone can reach out to Brennan Hatton and connect with you.
If you go to brennanhatton.com, you can connect with me. That's BRENNANHATTON.com.
And I just remembered we need to do another follow-up podcast to talk about your game. So your VR game.
Yes, I'd love to speak about that.
That is very cool. All right. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Lex. Great speaking to you.
All right. So I'll end that there. I was like, holy shit, we could go for another hour because I want to talk about his game.
That was awesome. That was really fun.
Yeah, that was really good. Is there a special announcement? Like, I will change my clothes and then sit back down and we'll do another 45 minutes just on your game if you want. Is there anything you want to announce around that? Like, is there?
No, not announcements yet. I'm looking forward to talking about it. And there's lots I can talk about it, but it's been 3 months of sort of stalled development on it because I had to rewrite the engine, randomize engine, and I did it in a couple of weeks. And I was basically putting out an update. I was putting out 2 updates a week when I first released it.
Wow.
And then I sort of spent 2 weeks. I'm like, all right, I'm just going to rewrite things, get rid of some bugs. And I just created more bugs that just slowed things down.
Oh, no.
And basically I've just spent the last 3 months just not wanting to get back into it. And I've actually just started getting back into it the last 2 weeks. And I've started making progress on it.
You need to get on a podcast and get pumped about it again so you actually go back and work on it.
Dude, that's what actually happened though. Some guy came and did a review of my game. And he did this most beautiful review of the game. And I'm just like, that's it. I'm just going to listen to this review on repeat for the next few hours and get the most challenging bugs out.
Yeah. That's great. That's awesome.
Yeah.
No, I'm excited to do that and happy to touch base in I don't know, however many weeks, whenever you're ready, and we'll go over it. And we'll just do a podcast purely on that because I think that this episode is a great lead into that episode in a way.
Cool. That's really fun.
Awesome.
Who's your audience? Who's listening to it?
I haven't released it yet, so we just crossed over 5 episodes last weekend. Last weekend. So I'm putting together the graphics, the intro. We're going to call it Omni Normal. So Omni being all things and normals, everyone's got their own level of normal, right? So I want to explore everyone's level of normal.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So it's omni-normal. They go for about 45 to an hour per episode. And I wanted to get 5 under the belt before I release it. And I'll probably just go straight to YouTube. I'm not really thinking about doing the whole, playing in the Apple landscape and the Android, it just sounds like a lot of work to try and host all of that. I just want to go straight to YouTube.
Is it going to be video based? Are we recording the video as well?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So
Sweet.
your beautiful hair is going to be in there. Yeah.
I was for some reason I was thinking it was just audio and I wasn't looking at the camera at all. So hopefully that came out well.
No, it came out fine. I was checking. Don't worry, I was checked everything. So
Cool.
Wasn't
picking my nose or anything.
No. Well, half the time I'm checking myself so I don't look like an idiot. Because it's the most embarrassing part. So again, super appreciate your time. It will be video. I'll send you a link to it and you'll be able to see it and review it and everything. But out of all the podcasts, yours has been sweet, very straightforward. There was like no hiccups in that, but I also kind of want hiccups to occur because it just keeps it organic. You know what I mean? Like I don't want it to be super like scripted. So no, you did really well. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Cheers, Lex. No, thanks for having us on it. That was really fun. I'm looking forward to doing it again.
And I speaking on audience, I don't have a particular audience yet. I just want to release it and get it out there. And I also made an effort to not overinvest in the hardware and everything. So you'll notice that, it's a little bit grainy. I've got a half decent mic.
Yeah, I can hear it. It sounds great.
Yeah, good. Okay. So a half decent mic, because my mate audio engineer, he said, yeah, you need good audio. But in terms of visuals, I'm thinking I'll upgrade over time, and once I hit podcast 567, then it will look amazing. But I'm not in a rush to do that. I don't want to. Perfectionism is a problem that I struggle with. Yeah.
I can relate. On that note, for the next one, I'll make sure I actually have a better mic with me because I just remembered I do have a better mic in my room. I haven't unboxed since I moved here.
Yeah, perfect.
So,
but I love that it's like grungy and kind of like taped all together to begin with. And over time, I'm expecting that we'll get to touch base and, again, do more podcasts. So we'll progressively aim to get better over time.
Cool.
All right, Brennan.
Very cool.
I'll let you go, man.
Thanks, Lex. Have a good one.
Yeah, you too. Talk soon.
We should catch up for a beer soon, though.
Absolutely.